I am a 30 years old male, and I got married 2 weeks ago. I was married before, but it ended after I found out that my older brother Thomas, 34 years old, got involved with my first wife. It was devastating because we were close and had a great relationship. I also helped him so much while he was struggling, and seeing how he repaid me hurts to this very day. I stopped talking to him, and Mom and Dad forced me to keep it a secret, and because I was too weak to argue with them, I just kept my own distance. Then I met my now wife. My family loved and embraced her as their own. Mom and Dad treat her like a queen, which helped repair and solidified my relationship with them. However, as the wedding was approaching, they told me they expected me to invite Thomas. I of course refused, but they kept guilting me about what the relatives and other guests would think and say when they don't see Thomas there. I fought with them about it till the day of the wedding. Turned out they'd invited him behind my back, but I found out and stopped them in time. They came to the wedding looking pissed, asking what we were going to tell people when they ask about Thomas. I told them I'd take care of it. And what I did was take a moment while everyone was paying attention, grabbed the mic and flat out announced this and said, "The reason I didn't invite Thomas to my wedding is because I was worried he'd steal my now wife just like he stole the first one." I said it playfully to not make it sound so tense, but most of the guests looked shocked and started mumbling. Then it went awkwardly quiet for a moment. Then we moved on, but I saw Mom and Dad walk out while looking at me grudgingly. Later they started lashing out about how I just exposed Thomas and caused him to be shunned by the family in the most hideous of ways. I told them that I already said I didn't want him there, yet they tried to push him on me repeatedly, saying, "What are people going to say?" So I told them the reason why he wasn't there in a playful way, but they, the guests, still got the message. Mom started yelling about how everyone will now look down on and shun Thomas. She called me pathetic and cruel for still punishing him and gradually ruining his life despite him apologizing and trying to reconcile. But in my opinion, some things are just unforgivable. We've been on horrible terms since then. My wife said at least now they're off my back about what people would say about not inviting him. My cousin turned 18 recently. She's in high school. She doesn't have a car, and during her birthday weekend, thought her parents were going to buy her one. They didn't get her one, and she was pretty upset. I should note that I'm not very close with my cousin, or the rest of my extended family for that matter. I only heard about this through the grapevine from my dad. Anyway, my cousin texts me on the Friday before her birthday asking if she can take my car. I just leased a new Ford Escape, to the mall and then for an out-of-town road trip with her friends over the weekend. I tell her no. She begs and pleads with me. I tell her no again. My car is for me to drive and for me only. If she wants her own car, she can save up and buy one. She calls me and says that I ruined her birthday and that she's embarrassed because her friends think she got a car for her birthday and she doesn't have one. I don't respond to her and think nothing of it. The weekend comes and I sleep in very late on that Saturday, waking up at 1 p.m, don't judge. Even though my car is parked in my driveway and my gate is closed, I come to realize that someone egged and TP'd my car. With many, many eggs and 5 to 6 rolls of TP. And since the weather was warm outside, the raw egg baked into my car, along with the dried up toilet paper, destroying the paint. Since I have security cameras around my house, I decide to go back and watch. At around 9:30ish that morning, I see my cousin and a bunch of her stupid friends vandalizing my car. I'm surprised she didn't smash the windows and poke holes in the tires too. I press charges and my cousin is in legal trouble. Her and her parents are pissed off at me for pressing charges, her parents telling me that she's just a kid, and that she's been through a lot of emotional stress doing virtual schooling for this past year, and that I should take that into consideration. And that I should be ashamed of myself for pressing legal charges against my baby cousin. That I'm almost 30 and don't I remember what I was like at that age? I do remember, and I wasn't stupid enough to egg anyone's car. And can't she work something out with me, like doing chores around my house for money if I drop the charges, that she's young, that she doesn't need a felony on her record, etc., and that it was just a prank. Right after I pressed charges, my cousin was calling and texting me over and over saying that this could have been avoided had I let her take my car. I need to add that my cousin already has a felony on her record, a DUI. She's not remorseful of anything. Also, my aunt and uncle will not pay me for the damages. They just want me to drop the charges and pay for everything myself like nothing happened. So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight. Taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, "Okay, boomer." Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, "Okay, boomer," to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. University is starting back soon, so many of my friends started moving back to town. I am 17 female, live in a house with 5 friends. I wasn't born in the UK but moved here with my parents when I was 17. We come from another European country, so I speak my native language, English, which is far from perfect. I've been learning Spanish and English since I was little and my Spanish is better than my English. I don't have an obvious accent in English, people just assume that I am Canadian. We had a small party on Saturday and one friend brought his new girlfriend, Jess. Jess 20, and she's the reason why I am posting here. Jess made sure to let everyone know that she's a polyglot and speaks multiple languages. I was obviously impressed. I study modern languages, meaning that I'm learning Italian and German on top of Spanish. And obviously I asked what languages she speaks: Spanish, Japanese, Arabic, my native language, German, Korean, and French. I told her how impressed I was and carried on with my evening. I had a short phone call with my mom, whom I obviously speak to in my native tongue, and I went out of the house to talk to her. Jess was out in the garden and heard my conversation, and she corrected me on my pronunciation. I told her that she was in the wrong, and she insisted that she knows better. I didn't fancy getting into any arguments, so I ignored her and went back inside saying, whatever. Later, I bumped my head and swore loudly in Spanish. I tend to code switch a lot when drunk, and she corrected my pronunciation, which was funny because it was her who was incorrect. I ignored her again. A while later, I wanted my friend, who is from Spain, to hand me something, but I forgot how it's called in English. So I said, hand me Spanish word, please, knowing my friend would understand. Jess decided to correct me again, using completely incorrect word. My friend and I looked at each other, and me being drunk, I lost any self-control I had. I spoke to Jess in Spanish asking her what the hell she thinks she's doing. And she looked at me telling me that my Spanish was so wrong that she didn't understand a word. It wasn't but okay. So I told her the same thing in my native tongue. To which she replied with the same thing. I laughed at her and told her it's my native language and she really shouldn't lie about being a polyglot and correcting people when she doesn't actually speak those languages. She was fuming. She tried to grab her boyfriend's hand and leave with him, but he was too drunk to care and just said, told you to stop lying. I don't know how she got my number, but she called me this morning screaming what an asshole I am to humiliate her like that, and if she knew I spoke the language, she wouldn't have corrected me. I do feel bad now. I realize how humiliating this must have been for her, but on the other hand, she shouldn't have been lying.